Hey, today we're going to continue talking about factoring trinomials, and this time they're going to be slightly different. The majority of our process is going to stay the same, but this time you can see the first number at the beginning is not 1. And so what we did in the last lesson is we labeled our A, B, and C, and then we went down here and we documented what is B. B is 5, and then we wanted to multiply A times C, and so we're going to be multiplying 4 times -6, and we get -24. And so our goal was to find two numbers that add to be B and multiply to be A times C. And so that process is the same. We're going to pick two numbers that multiply to be -24 and also add to be 5. And this takes some maybe some guessing and checking, and the more you do of these, the better you'll get at this. And so if we multiply 8 times -3, we're going to need a negative number to get a negative answer here. 8 times -3 is -24. 8 plus -3 is +5. And so these are the factors we're going to use. And here's where our process becomes a little different when this number is not 1. We're going to rewrite our original expression with the first piece, 4n squared. We're going to have the ending the same, -6. But now what we're going to do is instead of writing plus 5n, we're going to write plus 8n minus 3n. 8 minus 3 is 5, and so this expression is the same, it just looks slightly different. And now what we can actually do to factor this, otherwise it would be pretty tricky, is we're going to take these two pieces and factor out a greatest common factor. So we can divide both of these by 4 and both of them by n. And when we do that, 4 divided by 4 is 1, n squared divided by n is n. 8 divided by 4 is 2, n divided by n is, they cancel, and so we get that. We can also factor out a greatest common factor between these two numbers. We can divide out a -3. We can't divide out any n's because -6 doesn't have any n's. So when we divide -3n by -3, we get positive n. When we divide -6 by -3, we get positive 2. You can see that in parentheses for both of these, we have the same thing. N plus 2 is one of our factors of our original expression. The other factor is those two numbers put in parentheses, 4n minus 3. And that's how we can factor a trinomial when the first number is not 1. Let me do another one. I like to label A, B, and C so I know where to look for them. And then I'm going to document B is -1. Remember, that's -1. There's no number written there. Then I'm going to find A times C. So 4 times -3, which is -12. I want my numbers to add to be -1 and multiply to be -12. And it's not a bad idea to write all this stuff out for every problem you do so you're practicing a process, the same process every time. Two numbers that multiply to be -12 and add to be -1 are -4 and +3. Again, when you're doing these on your own, it might take a few tries before you get the two numbers that multiply to be this A times C and add to be -1. And so now the new step, since 4 is at the beginning, since A is 4 and A is not 1, we need to rewrite our expression. We're going to start it the same way. We're going to end it the same way. But we're going to take this -1m and we're going to rewrite it as -4m plus 3m. And we always want to try and write these two new pieces next to the original piece that we think has a greatest common factor. So naturally, these two have 4's in them, these two have 3's in them. So now we are going to factor out a greatest common factor between those two. We can divide them both by 4m. So we're left with m minus 1. We can divide both of those by positive 3. And we're going to be left with m minus 1. So hopefully you have practiced the greatest common factors, done the greatest common factor lesson before doing this one. If you are struggling with how I'm getting those greatest common factors out, please do ask before we get too long into the lesson. I don't want you to be stuck. You can see both of these has m minus 1 in parentheses. That's one of our two factors. Our other factor, we're going to take the things in front, 4m and plus 3, and that is our other factor. So let me do one more. I'm always going to document A, B, and C. I'm going to write down what B is. B is negative 1 again. We want our two numbers to add to be B. I'm going to do A times C, 6 times negative 12, which is negative 72. We want our two numbers to multiply to be that. So lots of numbers that multiply to be negative 72. The two numbers we need are negative 9 and positive 8. Negative 9 plus 8 gives us negative 1, so those are our two numbers. We are going to rewrite. That's the new thing today, is that we're rewriting our original expression. Our original expression, we're going to start with that first number, or that first term, 6x squared. We're going to end with our final term the same. The thing that changes here is that negative x is now negative 9x plus 8x. And we want to write these so that the first one, it looks like I have a greatest common factor with 6x squared. 8x looks like I can divide by the same thing as 12. The more you do these, the quicker you can see which ones to put together. So I can divide 6 and 9 by 3, and x squared and x by x. So 3x is my greatest common factor. When I divide 6x squared by 3x, I get 2x. When I divide negative 9x by 3x, I get negative 3. Then I can take the greatest common factor out of those two terms. I can divide them both by 4. When I divide this by 4, I get 2x. When I divide negative 12 by 4, I get negative 3. What we're aiming for is the parentheses to be exactly the same. We have that. So my first factor is 2x minus 3. My second factor comes from these two outside pieces, 3x plus 4. So like I said, if you are stuck at all, please ask for help before you go on to the U-Try problems, and especially before you go on to the practice. I want you to be able to practice having understood some of what I just said so that you can reinforce correct ideas and not incorrect ones. I really only have one U-Try for you to do, so I want you in the first U-Try box to type the word free. I didn't like this problem, so that's a freebie for you today. I want you to go ahead and try and factor this one. Type your answer in, and then check your answer after you press play. So check your answer. These are both A's, by the way. They are not 9s. Sometimes people think my A's look like 9s. If you didn't get the same thing as me, please do raise your hand. Please ask me for help so we can look at what you did and find a potential mistake. If you have asked for help where you got stuck, And we've sorted out your problems. You should go on and do these practice problems. Take your time on these. As ever, if you need help while you're practicing, please ask me.